Well, friends, our resident Fab Four occult examiner and inspector, Richard Balducci, is back with us. And I put the video up about Glastonbury and Billy playing the Glastonbury Music Festival in June of 2020. And Richard wrote me and said that we have some more ground to cover. So Richard is with us, and I think, Richard, we're going to start as a setup here to talk about the Beatles' rooftop concert, if I'm not mistaken. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's as good a place as any to start, because that will tie in to the major astounding archaeocultology find at the end of this broadcast.
And Richard, I believe the concert, let me just take a quick look here, was on January 30th, 1969.
Yes, and that date that was selected was no accident. It was no spur-of-the-moment decision to lug a piano up to the roof and put on a show for everybody that they couldn't see, practically. The Beatles' rooftop concert on that date comes 29 and a half days times 29 and a half days after the premeditated sacrifice of James Paul McCartney on September the 11th, 1966. The point being that our moon orbits around the Earth once every 29 and a half days from new moon to new moon phase, or from full moon to full moon phase, whichever way you want to look at it. So the Beatles' rooftop concert took place on a square of the lunar orbit times itself, 29.5 times 29.5. The Earth's lunar orbit squared when the Beatles did their rooftop concert.
The other thing I've noticed, Richard, as I'm looking at it here, the length of the concert was 42 minutes. So 4 plus 2 is 6.
And 42 would be 0.666, 2/3 of an hour. You see what I'm saying? Of 60 minutes?
Yeah.
42 minutes would be 0.666, 2/3 of an hour.
Very interesting.
Nice touch, boys. Now, do you want to talk about the conceptions?
Yeah, let's talk about the conception dates, Richard. Before we started the show, we talked about Billy's conception. We talked about his son James's date when you believe that it was possible that he was conceived. And it's very, very strange and very, very weird probably for a lot of people to hear this and listen to it and get their heads wrapped around it. But even when people are conceived within this occulted reality, it's mind-numbing. So did you want to start with Billy first, or did you want to start with his son James? Where did you want to go with that?
Well, where I started with it was you hipped me to it when you mentioned the fact about the Beatles' rivals, the Monkees, premiering on, September 11th.
September 12th.
September 12th. I'm sorry. Thank you. And you mentioned about James McCartney, the details on his birth. So that got me started. And also the events of September the 11th, both 1966 and 2001, as well as the Moped accident. And this all harkens to the same concept. And the concept is September the 11th takes place exactly 260 days after the birth of the sun on December 25th, Christmas Day. So that's the start of the Aztec Mayan 260-day calendar based on the human gestation cycle, how long it takes to conceive and birth a baby. And then at the end of that cycle is, coinky-dinkily enough, September the 11th, the 260th day. This also applies to William Wallace Shepard, who we believe was born on September the 9th. So that means that he was conceived, William Wallace Shepard was conceived on the day of the sun's death in the northern hemisphere, the winter solstice. Then sometime later on, apparently Fall and Linda McCartney decided to create a baby, their son, as it turns out, who was conceived and planned for by being conceived on the day of the sun's birth, December 25th. And then, he was born on the date he was born. You have it there.
September 12th, 1977.
So what this means is the daddy, the father, William Wallace Shepard, was conceived on the day of the sun's death in the Northern Hemisphere, December 21st, the winter solstice. And then he conceived his son, James McCartney, on the day of the sun's birth, December 25th.
Okay. Now, the other thing I want to point out to the audience, I don't think I've mentioned this on any shows, Richard, is, but if Billy's birthday is September 9th, 1937, and clues are pointing us clearly in that direction. If we take a look at September 9th, 1937, when we regroup the numbers, it's 9/11. So September 9th, September's the 9th month, the day 9, 9 plus 9 is 18, 1 plus 8 is 9. Then when we look at the year 1937, in numerology, 9s equals 0. So 1937, we have 1 plus 0 plus 3 plus 7, that equals 11. So Billy's birth date, September 9th, 1937, regroups to 9/11.
Wow. This 260-day human gestation cycle also applies to James Paul McCartney's Moped accident, where it happens on December 26th, 260 days before his premeditated satanic ritual sacrifice on September the 11th. And the other day, I finally realized the significance of the moped. It kept bothering me. Moped. What does it mean? What does it mean? Well, a moped is a tiny motorcycle. So what they were saying with the moped accident, to those in the know, the Satanists, the occultists, the black magic sorcerers, the witches and warlocks and whoever, that James Paul McCartney's cycle was very small. He's on a very small cycle now, a 260-day countdown to his demise. You know, kind of whetted their appetites, I'm sure, in very dark places.
It's interesting you should bring that up, because in memoirs, Tom and Billy don't mention the moped accident with regard to biological Paul's runway being short. But what they do say is that I guess there was a Satanist, I believe it was Kenneth Anger at the time, that was able to do some kind of reading with regard to biological Paul McCartney. In other words, biological Paul McCartney was there with him. And the comment made to biological Paul by whoever was doing the reading, this person would be a priest, a satanic priest, said to him that you don't have a lot of time left. And that's in the book. So I'll leave it there, for what it's worth. Very interesting.
Well, here's the whole point about that. What they were saying with that moped accident was the conception of the corpse, the conception of the future corpse of James Paul McCartney took place on December 26th with his short cycle. And then the birth of the corpse of James Paul McCartney, the birth of the cadaver, took place September the 11th, 1966, 260-day human gestation cycle later. So you have the conception of the corpse and the birth of the corpse.
Could it also be viewed as not only just the conception of the corpse, but if we look at biological Paul as a graven Christ figure, there's the death and then the resurrection via Billy?
It's totally, you hit the nail on the head. It's all a part of the long-running ritual. It's one of the accumulations of the rituals within rituals.
Yeah.
See, they're looking at it reversed from the way we are. When somebody dies, we say, oh, a living person dies, well, we feel sad for him, But they're looking at it as the conception and the birth of the corpse. The corpse is born when the living soul departs the body, is the birth of the corpse for all eternity on top of it.
Well, that would coincide with the alchemical philosophies that says that in order for you to bring something new, you have to take down the old, right? So in order to bring in the new, you have to completely eliminate the old. That's the only way you can do it. So you can't have any remnants of the old and think that you can have something brand new. It has to be shut down completely in order to move to a new era, a new period, a new eon or whatever. So are there other conception dates? We talked about Billy. We talked about James.
Yes, there is one other one we should touch on, and that is Witchy Poo herself, Yoko Ono.
Okay.
Yoko, yes, I'm a witch Ono. She's fascinating. She's almost taken up a whole chapter just, finding out about her. When Yoko Ono was conceived, the sun was exactly conjunct the star Rigel. And the fascinating occult information about Rigel, the star, is it illuminates what is known as the Witch Head Nebula. And there are all sorts of pictures of Rigel illuminating the Witch Head Nebula. So the conception of Yoko Ono took place when the sun, the giver of life, was exactly conjunct the star Rigel, which illuminates the Witch Head Nebula.
And let me just say this, too, because some folks might not get the reference that she's a witch. So Yoko released an album on February 6th, 2007, and the title of the album is Yes, I'm a Witch.
Now let me tell you how Yoko Ono is not just a witch. She's probably the greatest witch in the history of planet Earth. Maybe not counting Hillary Clinton. We still haven't tabulated her corpses up yet. But here's why I say this, and this just took my breath away. Which, by the way, that's the word she wrote to John Lennon on that card when she first met him at the Indica Art Gallery, Breathe. So here's what took my breath away. When John Lennon was ritually sacrificed on December 8th, 1980, beneath the arch of Bell Ball Bail at the Dakota Building, the midnight sun was conjunct the Witch Head Nebula. Now, 2 days later, when the final part of the occult ritual took place with the cremation ceremony ritual out of public view of John Lennon, the midnight sun was conjunct the star Rigel, which was the star that Yoko Ono was conceived with the sun being conjuncted on the day she was conceived. And then she inherited everything he ever earned. So the witch gets all the money, gets all the power, gets all the rights to the John Lennon industry.
In fact, in Memoirs in the blue-covered book, Billy tells us straight out that she was John's handler. That's number one. And you just talked about everything went to Yoko. And that reminds me of a story of a video interview I watched of Julian Lennon where he said that he actually had to buy back memorabilia of his dad's. Julian claims that he actually had to spend his own money to go buy back stuff that he wanted that was his dad's stuff, his personal stuff.
Yeah, that's a very, very dark soul that would do that to John Lennon's son. You know, you would think you'd just give it to her. But here's the thing. I don't think it was necessarily, hey, I need to make an extra $12.50 on that item, your shirt your dad wore. I think it was more the control and the inflicting of emotional distress on John Lennon's son by the witch Yoko. That one interviewer from Playboy noted very uncannily and precisely that Yoko Ono never smiles. And doesn't she usually wear black anyway?
Black and white, colors of duality. Almost always you'll see her decked out in black and white. Also in that interview on Playboy, I think you and I might have mentioned this, but for those who maybe missed it, in that interview, the person that was given the job to do the interview, to interview John and Yoko, before he could do that interview, Yoko had to do an astrology analysis of the interviewer.
Yes.
So whatever came back from their analysis of his astrology, he got the green light to do the interview. But very interesting because, you know, a lot of times people think the astrology piece of this and the occult piece of this is just way out there. But when you take a look at their own stories, when you take a look at how it's reported back to us in the mainstream, it's all there. So many people, myself included, you know, until a few years back, looked past that stuff. I didn't put any importance on it. Like when I read the 1980 Playboy interview back in 1980 because I wanted to read what John Lennon had to say. I had to have read that piece in the interview, but I didn't pay it any mind. And it wasn't until today that when I went back and reread the interview, I thought to myself, well, look at that. It's right there. They're using astrology. They're using the occult.
Yeah, and think how powerful that is at the time with his death. Didn't that article come out after his death, shortly after his death?
Yes.
Think of the power that had on your mind, my mind, everyone's mind. Oh, my God, John Lennon's dead. There's not going to be any more Beatles songs. There's not going to be more Beatles. There's not going to be more any John Lennon songs. This is his final words. Oh, my God, I got to read these. What would the final words of this great soul, this man, what did he say? Think how powerful. What a magnet of the mind.
All right, Richard. So that brings us to the part of the show which we're going to spend a lot of time on, and that's Glastonbury. So I did a video the other day, and let me just give the audience a little bit of a background. You know what happened, but just in case anybody doesn't know, what happened was I received a comment on YouTube, and a person said, hey, Mike, you should take a look into Billy playing Glastonbury, the music festival in 2020. So, I wrote it down. I took note of it. And then the next morning, I said, well, let me take a look. And I did. I looked at the numbers, and as an example, I spoke about in the video that the festival kicks off on June 24th. When we regroup the numbers, June is 6, 24 the day, 2 plus 4 is 6, 66. Billy's going to play on June 27th. Of course, the month is June, the day 27, 2 plus 7 is 9. When he's Billy, he's 6. When he's Paul, he's playing the 9s. When we add 6 plus 9 together, we get 15. 1 plus 5 is 6. He's rolling the 6s. And the confirmation of Billy playing at Glastonbury came out on November 18th. And it was done in the mainstream media, and it was also a bunch of tweets, including Billy himself tweeting it out. So November being 11, the day 18, 1 plus 8 is 9, and we have the whole 9/11 date in play again. It's in reverse. 11/9, 9/11, so it goes forward and backward for those that don't understand. So it's 9/11. And so with that, Richard wrote me and said, Mike, good video, but there's more to it. And so that's what we want to talk about now. So, Richard, where did you want to go with it after my little table setting there?
Well, you set a very nice table. That looks pretty. There's a lot of 666s connected with Glastonbury, and there's a 9/11 here and there, too. You can start with the geographical coordinates of the pyramid stage at the Glastonbury Festival. It adds up to 666 because the pyramid stage at Glastonbury is located 51 degrees, 9 minutes, 9 seconds north by 2 degrees, 35 minutes, 23 seconds west. So let's take the first number. You can achieve 666 a couple of different ways. If you add the 5 and the 1, you get 6. And then the 9 and the 9 is 6 inverted. Or you can add 5 plus 1 plus 9 plus 9 equals 24, and 2 plus 4 equals 6. So that's the north geographic coordinates. And then the west coordinates, if you add them 2 plus 3 plus 5 plus 2 plus 3, you get 15, and 1 plus 5 is 6. Now, there's something else in play here behind the scenes on the placing of that pyramid stage at the Glastonbury Festival, because the angle of slope on the Great Pyramid at Giza is said to be anywhere from 51 degrees, 19 minutes, 14 seconds to 51.2 degrees to 51.43 degrees to 51.5 degrees. So take your pick on getting that angle of slope down. See, they've removed the outer casings of the Great Pyramid, so we can't get a definite, this is what it was. But what I'm saying here is the angle of slope on the Great Pyramid matches the 51 degrees north placement of the pyramid stage at the Glastonbury Festival. So what they're replicating from the equator is the angle of slope on planet Earth. It's basically 51 degrees is kind of 2/3 of the way to 90 degrees, if that makes sense to you.
No, it does make sense to me. And two things, Richard. Number one, let me just let the audience know that the stage at Glastonbury is literally called the pyramid stage. So this is not something that a name that we've given it. The other thing is, as you're going through the numbers here, I remember reading an article that was talking about when Billy played in Glastonbury back in 2004, and they said that his chatter between some of the songs, he was talking about ley lines.
Well, Victoria Lee has some information on that because apparently that pyramid stage at Glastonbury is either on the Stonehenge ley line or it's very, very, very close to it. So thank you, Victoria Lee, on that information. William Wallace Shepard, posing as Paul McCartney, played there at Glastonbury on June 26, 2004. Now, he will play his final concert at Glastonbury on June 27, 2020, and you took us through the numerology on that. The interesting thing about that particular date, William Wallace Shepard picked to walk out onto that pyramid stage that night on June 27, 2020, involves the little-known esoteric and occult fact that since the sacrifice of James Paul McCartney on September the 11th, 1966, 13 days after the final Beatles concert, from the day of James Paul McCartney's well-timed death to William Wallace Shepard walking out onto the pyramid stage, in that time frame, the moon has completed exactly 666 lunar cycles and 666 orbits around the Earth.
Yeah, we talked about this in the other show, Richard, that the calculating and the precision is mind-boggling.
Well, let's torque the precision up a little bit on that profound fact, which is going to shake the core of Beatles fans everywhere, because the number of days counting from September the 11th, 1966 to June 27th, 2020 totals 19,649 days, counting both dates. So we divide 19,649 days, we divide that by 29.5, which is the amount of time that it takes for our moon to make a complete orbit of the Earth from new moon to new moon phase or from full moon to full moon phase. So we divide 19,649 by 29.5, and we get 666.0666. Now, some calculators will round it up. Not every calculator is the same, believe it or not. I found that out the hard way. Some calculators will pop that number out as 666.07, but what's happening with the 07 is it's being rounded up from 0.0666. The calculator is actually rounding up, just like the daylight savings time is designed to take us off the natural solar Earth moon cycle time.
So it's 666 is what it is. And so his appearance on the stage this coming June 2020 on June 27th is completely planned out. It's not really when his calendar was available, right? When his schedule permitted.
He just happened to have an opening on that date. His 6 o'clock appointment got canceled, apparently.
You know, back in 2004, he played a 33-song set. So, and of course, 33 is a representation of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Richard, the question I have for you, and maybe we could take the audience through this real quick. Why are the lunar cycles so important to them? What does the lunar cycle represent? Because it appears to be in play a lot when we look at the occult.
Well, for one thing, you can think about how you feel during a full moon. People tend to get a little frisky. They tend to get a little crazy. Also, when the moon is invisible for 3 days between the last quarter crescent, the very thin crescent waning moon and the waxing very thin crescent moon, when the moon is invisible is when, for magical purposes, it is at its most powerful for invoking, for creating something.
So would that go along with the feminine attributes of the moon? In other words, giving birth or the ability to transform?
Right. The earth is a living female form. The moon is a dead female form. The thing about the moon and all planets, actually, that is key and is never discussed anywhere, as far as I can tell, is the esoteric fact that the sun casts an obelisk-type shadow, a dark umbra, out of every planet in the solar system. So the dark umbra pyramid shadow of Mercury will be darker than the dark pyramid umbra obelisk shadow of, say, Pluto. But my point is, in the coldness of space, this is where evil demons, souls, the evil vibrational consciousness hides. They are relegated to the darkest of the dark of space, which is in the shadow of a planet. So when you have a solar eclipse and you have the dead moon covering the life-giving sun, you actually have physically the dark umbra obelisk shadow of the moon physically stabs the earth and moves across it. Like that obelisk path in, the eclipse, solar eclipse of August 21st, 2017?
Yeah.
That marked a big line across the United States going from west to east. And then the next one that comes 7 years later finishes marking the cross across the United States. So those two solar eclipses are, in effect, marking a big witch's X, hex death for the United States. I have some information here for the future. On August 27th, 2025, the United States of America will be exactly 13,000 weeks old, counting from the 4th of July, 1776, and including that date. There are some other dates on here, but that's a big key one to watch. So the witches are apparently getting ready to banish the United States. We see that every day in the news. Now back to Glastonbury, already in progress. Interestingly, if you remember, James Paul McCartney, while he was alive from his birth to his death, the moon had completed exactly 300 orbits by the time he exited the world stage on September the 11th, 1966. So the interesting thing is, if you add the 666 lunar orbits since the death of James Paul McCartney on the date of June 27, 2020, to the 300 lunar orbits that took place while Paul McCartney was alive, you get the number 966 lunar orbits total. And, 966 is another variation of the 666. It's like combing through the Exorcist kid Damon's hair, There it is. There it is, everybody. Another 666. Now, if you subtract the 300 lunar orbits during the life of James Paul McCartney, the real one, from the 666 lunar orbits since his hex death, you get the number 366, which is in resonance to a leap year number of 366 days. And also 366 lunar orbits divided by the occult number 33 gives us 11.09, which is 9/11 backwards. the day of James Paul McCartney's hex death back in 1966. Now, the number 966 in the witches' gematria just so happens to add up to the words planet Saturn. And 966 in the Hebrew gematria adds up to the words sacred burial grounds, running out of time, Antichrist, May 1. And it also adds up to stop being so stupid. So wake up, everybody, wake up! We've just proven today that the Satanism mechanism, the death machine, occult device, is in play. It's alive. It's functioning. There it is. As far as I'm concerned, these Satanists, black magic occultists, sorcerers, witches, warlocks, politicians, they jumped the shark at Glastonbury. Dude, when William walks out onto that stage 666 lunar cycles after the death of the real James Paul McCartney that night, they jumped the shark. It's going to be interesting to see if he makes it off that stage and how many people will be aware of this occult signature of 666 lunar cycles since the hex death of James Paul McCartney. Might they feel a little emotional about that?
Yeah, my sense is that most people that are going to be there are going to be completely enamored and in a trance state. You know, we have to remember, too, that there's indications that Billy is the son of Aleister Crowley, and if not the son, that he is related, directly related, bloodline-wise to Crowley. And if he is the son of Crowley, he's referred to, and he has referred to himself using anagrams as the son of the magician. And so we will have the son of the magician on stage on June 27, 2020 at Glastonbury with a big giant pyramid behind him. It is amazing, Richard.
And there's even more, Mike, because when Billy walks out onto that stage that night, that's 6 days after a solar eclipse.
Is that right?
Yes, which happens on the summer solstice, June 21st, which happens 13 degrees away from the sacred star Sepsothis Sirius, which the sun is exactly conjunct 13 days after the summer solstice on the 4th of July. The only red, white, and blue star, by the way. And not only is it a solar eclipse, Mike, it's an annular solar eclipse, like the cover of my last book. It looks like a halo in the sky. And that takes place on June 21st, 2020. And it also takes place on Julian calendar day number 44,002. Julius Caesar didn't have enough power. He decided, you know what, I want to make my own calendar because I'm on my time and I want everybody else to be on my time too. So the Julian calendar day number 44,002 divided by 666 equals 66.0666. You can think about that as, 66 and 6 100th and 6 1,000th. Also, if you wish to think of it that way.
Richard, do you think that his performance at Glastonbury, do you get a sense that he's reaching the end of the runway?
I don't think he'll ever do another concert after Glastonbury in 2020 because it's the perfect exit stage left for the occultist, Satanist, whatever. Now, he might warble a little bit on a talk show, or they might wheel him out in his wheelchair at some future somebody else's concert, for a poignant moment. But as far as the fall McCartney impersonator of James Paul McCartney's show, that long-running show looks like it's going to be ending exactly 666 lunar cycles after the hex death of James Paul McCartney. At least that's what I expect.
Yeah. I don't have the knowledge that you have, but I was having a suspicion that this is nearing the end. Now, when I say nearing the end, folks, I don't mean that he's going to pass away the following week. It's very possible the scenario will play out, like Richard said, that this might be his last concert performance, big concert performance. And I suspect that he may do one more studio album because Egypt Station was his 17th, and 1 + 7 is 8. And we know that when he plays Paul McCartney, he's about the 9. So I'm going to guess, and it's probably a pretty good guess, that he has one more studio album coming out. That'll be his 18th, and that will be that. So sunsetting means basically wrapping up, maybe going into some form of retirement, and then play it out from there. People have asked me, when do I think he's going to pass away? Which, of course, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. But Billy is going to be 83 years old in 2020, in September of 2020. And if I had to guess, he'll probably play it out until he's 90, because 9 + 0 is 9. And that's what my guess is. And again, it is a guess. So in any case, what else do you have there, Richard?
Well, something else pertaining to that annular solar eclipse on the summer solstice, June 21st, 2020, 6 days before William takes to the pyramid stage at Glastonbury. The annular solar eclipse on that date marks exactly 54 years to the day since the song She Said, recorded on the summer solstice, June 21st, 1966. Also, 33 days after a solar eclipse on May 20th, 1966. And as we all know, the lyrics to She Said starts out, "She said, I know what it is like to be dead. I know what it is to be sad. And she's making me feel like I've never been born." So who's that? The whole festival at Glastonbury revolves around the summer goddess. So you can call it Isis. There's other names for it here as well. But Isis is the summer goddess because she's the Egyptian goddess associated with the obelisk star, Sepsoth Sirius, the sacred star of the ancient Egyptians. Now, the festival also rolls through, it starts June 24th. 2 + 4 is 6, 2020. And of course, June 25th is the day that the satanic baby Lucifer Jr. was born in the movie Rosemary's Baby in 66. And that same date, June 25th, is known as Global Beatles Day. So then 2 days after that, June 27th, 2020, James Paul McCartney trots out onto the pyramid stage, 666 orbits of the moon later, after James Paul McCartney's death. And believe it or not, as if all that wasn't enough, and I have more, I've got pages and pages more, but, your head's probably up to almost full right now. You're topped off. Glastonbury in the Witches' Gematria adds up to 990. So there's another type of 666, as does New World Order, Holy City, as does voodoo black magic. And the magic is spelled with a C with no K on that, by the way.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you wrote me, Richard, and we caught up on this. I have to say that more and more people are catching on to this, and I mentioned to Richard before we got on the show that, I am trying to kind of back out here, and, I'll still be hopping into the whole McCartney topic when key events or significant events take place. I consider this whole Glastonbury thing to be significant, as you can tell, because of the information that Richard has brought forth. But I don't know, Richard, it seems like every time I try to get a breather from this stuff, something else just lands in our laps. It seems to be a never-ending, perpetual cycle of information. And I guess a part of that is because once you become familiar with what to look for, you see more, at least in my case, right? So the information that you brought forth, in my mind, solidifies how important the occult is to what goes on in our reality. Again, folks, it's not just the Beatles. It's not just Paul McCartney. It's everywhere. The reason why the McCartney conspiracy to me is important Because some people will say to me, oh, why is it so important? It's just a songwriter. It's just a band. What difference does it make? But when you take a look at this conspiracy, Richard, it contains all the elements of the controlling apparatus around us, secret societies, Freemasonry, the Illuminati, Tavistock, mind control, social engineering, the drug culture, Crowley, magic, numerology, mysticism, rituals, Luciferianism / Satanism. It's all rolled up in a nice big package in this conspiracy. Would you agree?
Well said, Sage. Well said.
You could spend your time in other conspiracies and taking a look into them, doing the research, but this one here is just unbelievable as far as how it's packaged and what it contains.
I think you said it all, Sage. I think we should make off with whatever piece of our sanity we still have left, to us after all this.
Yeah. What I always tell people, Richard, is go live your life. Knowledge is power. People ask me, when you get into this stuff, Mike, does it bother you? To me, it's information, it's knowledge, and from that information and that knowledge, and this allows you to avoid the landmines, the traps that are out there that have been laid for all of us. And when you wake up to this stuff, you avoid the traps.
Yeah. And just for the cherry on top, I happened to do a gematria search on the words 666 lunar orbits. And in the witch's gematria, that phrase adds up to 894, as does skull and bones, and as does the words 66.
There you go. Okay, Richard, is there anything else? I don't want to keep you. I know we wanted to do a quick down and dirty video on this just to get the information out because of the whole thing with Glastonbury being announced, and we thought it was important to convene and to talk about it. I will have the other shows out, by the way, just so you know. Folks, I still have another 2 hours or so of shows that Richard and I have done, and those will be out as well. So it just takes time to get through the material, edit it, and then get it uploaded. But it will all come out.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. Everything, it's just it's a great long-running show, no matter which way you want to look at it.
Yep, absolutely.
53 years plus and counting.
Yeah, he's probably going to go 60 years, so he can get another 6 in, 6 plus 0.
I wonder what does run through his mind. When he's Vivian Stanshall, does he have a number for him too? Does he have a number for Phil Ackrell? Does he have a number for Percy Thrillington and the Thrillingtons? Or, at what point does he go crazy?
I have to send you I don't know if you've seen this. Hold on one second. I have an image that was sent to me comparing Stanshall to the Let It Be version of Billy. And it's quite telling. If you hold on one second, let me send it to you so you can take a look at it so I can get your thoughts on it.
Yay, electronic presence.
So there you go, Richard. If you take a look.
Oh, my goodness gracious, look at that.
This picture was sent to me by a listener. It's really good work. And you can clearly see that that's the same person. Obviously, the Billy McCartney version has had surgeries, but even with the surgeries, everything lines up, even the lines on the forehead.
You've got quite a team of detectives. I think when this is all wrapped up that we should, form an agency and, go investigate, a bunch of other stuff, too, with our research powers and all that, That would be amazing.
Well, we have a core group of around 6 of us, a half dozen.
The Apple Core Group. That's what you should call yourselves.
The Apple Core Group. And it's a loose group of researchers, and we've become good friends over time, and we just share information, and that's how it's come together. And then I have folks that are not part of the research, but they're just really smart people that send me information through email or through comments on YouTube or through PMs on Facebook. This one came from a listener via a PM from my Sage of Quay Facebook page, and he said, Mike, I am now a believer, is essentially what they told me. And I wrote back and I said, I would not mislead you. And I'm not in the business to do this for hyperbole or for clicks or any of that stuff. I'm really doing this because this topic, Richard, interests me so much. because of the magnitude of the deception, that how could you not want to understand it? That's how I look at it.
Right. One of your responders on the comments section said the very wise thing. This is bigger than just one guy, Paul McCartney, getting dead. This involves the manipulation of the consciousness of society on a massive scale.
Right.
Over a long period of time, which is still going on. And what else is it going on? All these other things that we think we know, which we don't.
Right. So there are people that really understand it because that's it in a nutshell. And there's different degrees in which people get this. Of course, there are the degrees of people that will never get it. They don't want to see it. They deny it. And you and I spoke before we got started here. Folks that look at this and then just want to deny it are doing so because they don't want to see it. They need to deny it for whatever reasons. Maybe it's because it makes them uncomfortable. It shakes the foundations of their reality. Who knows? But more and more people are getting it. I mean, I get the emails and the messages every single day. I'm not saying that it's a critical mass of people. It's not that. But when I take a look back 3 years where I started with this and then fast forward 3 years later, it's a quantum leap forward from that perspective.
Well, all I can say is the rabbit hole of the Paul is dead realization. Society is wide and giant and deep, and it goes all the way to the hot, hot, hot center of the earth. And I guess that's where we find our little Satanist friends who are plotting and planning all these things behind our backs.
Yep. There's a lot of planning going on. There's no question about it. You've shown us that. Well, Richard, thank you so much for reaching out again and for doing this show. And I'm going to have it out as soon as I can. In fact, I'll try to have it out by this weekend, Sunday the latest.
Thank you, Michael. It's like saying thank you for confirming that we live in a satanic nightmare of powerful witches and warlocks and demons that are all plotting and trying to kill us in very interesting and comical ways to them. Thanks for confirming.
Anytime I can help out, Richard, I'm that type of guy.
Oh, my God. I wonder how many people will be going into therapy after this broadcast.